Hello and welcome to Weltall podcast, the first, the only, the best Shinza podcast in the universe. I'm your host, Singer of Whiteline, and with me, as usual, is Zach. Hey Zach,
Hello. Hello.
how's it going?
Life here and there. The snake is getting in the way of everything. Everything fine.
As he does. I actually feel a bit better this week, maybe because last time we had our first podcast and I wasn't actually sure if it can work, but it did, and now I am actually quite enthusiastic about all this stuff. Uh,
Yeah. I definitely feel like it's a bit more confident this time
yes,
around.
we don't have as much of a mm, burden on us to do things right, although we certainly must try the best. Uh, Anyways, so today we will discuss the latest news in the Shinza world. We will start our mini series of podcasts on the anime version of Dies Irae. We will discuss 6 episodes of it today, and hopefully it won't take us 2 hours this time. Mm, Actually, I do believe that uh, we already got some feedback about our podcast, and one of the questions we got was, can you actually go for that long? Is it actually that deep of a topic to make 10 or even 20 podcasts on? And I think it is, but we certainly don't have to try and fit in as much as we must in each and every episode. So we will try to spread it out, and we will discuss the latest news and 1/3 of a topic, let us say. Uh, Alright, so let's not waste any time and move to the first topic of the day. So, as you might remember, we thought Light would release some new info on Pantheon last Friday.
You
Uh,
thought I was doubtful, and I was right.
yes. Basically, Light was Light once again, and they decided to move this reveal to this week, to June 30th, when they are going to uh, bring back Dies Irae Radio, which is an excellent feature which they brought to support and promote the anime, and so it makes sense to bring it back now when we are about to get the last 6 episodes
When
of it.
when is it coming back again?
It's coming back on June 30th, so on Saturday.
This Saturday? Okay,
Yes,
cool.
they are going to record it in the new DSR shop that they opened in Tokyo, and I pretty sure they are going to stream it right away, so we don't have to wait any longer.
Hmm. Okay, cool.
We'll talk about that when it comes. For now, we only know that they are going to release some Pantheon info. It might be as much and as little as possible. And they are going to have our lovely goddess Akibara Yui back at it again. And along with
Yuri-san, we love you.
yes, and along with her, she will have a guest, as she usually does, and this time it will be Harasawa Koki-san, who is
Spine.
voicing Spine. Yes,
Which is the
he's
second.
always. Uh,
It's the second time it's a radio, if I'm not mistaken. He was already there before, no?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah, he was.
they did invite him when they released his voice on the Pantheon alarm clock app.
Yes.
Yes, and before that, they also had him on the Happy Light Cafe. So the common light radio.
Yes.
Anyway, So, despite not releasing any Pantheon news, the new issue of Happy Late Cafe did air last Friday, and it actually did release some news that are related to Dies Irae. Most of it was actually just them oogling the new merchandise that is sold in the aforementioned Dies Irae shop. But they also had free, very interesting news uh, that we will discuss now. So the first one, and probably the least important of the three, is the new art book by G. Yusuke, who, if you don't know, has worked on both Dies Irae and Kajiri Kamui Kagura.
And Senshin-kan as well, though that's not
Yes,
Shinza related
that's
directly.
not here in nor there.
Yes.
And this art book is going to be called Omega Ewigkeit because it's like a fourth art book on Dies Irae. It will come out on August 10th, and it will feature more than 400 pages of various works that are related to both the games and the anime, because to promote the anime, G has drawn a lot of promotional artwork which hasn't really been released anywhere. And this is exactly the place to deliver it to the common customer.
Well, he did post it every week on Twitter, but
Yes, but it's not really the same.
no,
You
it's
can't hold it in your hand. It will
yeah,
probably
it's not.
be in higher
It's not.
definition.
Yeah, exactly. High definition, exactly.
But actually, the main selling point of it, from what I understand, is that it will include some artwork on Pantheon. So it will have some character artworks and the main visual, as mentioned on the website of the art book, which we will put in the description, but don't expect to see anything there besides the glorious picture of Reinhard doing what he does.
Reinharding, yes.
Yes. So, as I have already mentioned, it's not the first art book we have. It's like the fourth one, and
The eighth one, more like.
eighth one, really.
More like, yeah. Basically, there was like, I have like a box called
Yes. What I remember are
called
the first four art books, which are titled like the red book, the gold book, the black book, and the white book.
exactly those ones.
Yes.
Yes, there's those ones, which are technically all collected in the complete box. So that's like, you can consider them one, but there is some repetition, I think.
Yes,
between the
yes,
art
of course, because they were actually released besides separate releases of the game itself. So
Exactly, released as promotional bonuses
yes.
for different
So
shops.
from what I remember, the black book was released along with Also sprach Zarathustra. The white book was released along with Actes Fabula. The red book was actually released on Comic-Cat and contained various artworks for the drama CDs, which have already been released by that time. And the golden book is like kind of
It's a
what they are going for here.
It's a
Yeah.
Mantis Amentis.
Yes. So those are the first four. What was the next one?
Well, if we don't count the Kajiri Kamui Kagura art book,
Well, we probably don't.
there might be some art there from in the new art book in the Omega Ewigkeit one. Next one, is it the Masada Box one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, the Masada
So
Box
it
was
didn't
the
come
next.
too long ago.
Yeah, it came out like less than a year ago, I think.
Yes.
The Masada Box is, like I said last episode, is like a box where they basically a box of all the games Masada made. It also includes Senshinkan, by the way. It
Yes,
has
it
Senshinkan,
also
but
includes
Senjin.
Paradise Lost,
Yes,
which
it includes.
G didn't actually draw for, but it's there.
Yes, and there's also a beautiful cover art by G, which also has Rill from Paradise Lost on it,
Yes.
and it's the first time we've seen Rill drawn by G Yusuke, so that's
Yes.
exciting.
And does it have any parallel artwork inside?
I think it does.
Oh, it
Not a
does.
lot. Not a lot, though. It has a bit here and there. There's also
Well, let's be honest, it's not its strongest point.
it's
So,
not the strongest point, and this is a bit unrelated. I'm going a bit on a tangent here, but a couple of years back, GUSK released drew art on Masada's birthday of Masada being getting a
yes.
massage from his game's heroines, and I think you can see Astaroth
Yes,
in
it
the
does.
background. Is a little fairy
Yes.
flying around. So yeah, GUSK definitely knows Paradise Lost and is definitely. Drawn for it. But basically, the art book that came with the Masada premium box, had basically all of Masada's work in it. It had, like you said, Paradise Lost. It had Dies Irae. It had Kajiri Kamui Kagura.
Yes.
It also, I think, had the first art book instance of a very cute art of Mari and Rindo having a costume swap.
Yes.
Rindo in
Yes.
the Nazi uniform and Mari in Rindo's armor, which is
Yes.
an adorable artwork. But and it also had, of course, Senshinkan and Bansenjin art. A lot of this is also stuff that came out on, and also Interview with Kazuko Bay.
Yes.
All of this is also stuff that came out in like tapestries and assorted telephone cards and
So
all
again,
sorts
it's
of
not some artwork that was available in high quality.
No, not at all. Sadly enough,
Well,
color
now it
cards.
is.
Color cards are a cursed existence, and why are they so expensive? And why would anyone want them? But yes, I think the Master Box is the next significant one, and
I can also name another art book that came before, but it's not that big. It was like more of a booklet that came if you supported the anime on the crowdfunding campaign. You got this small booklet. It didn't really have any previously published artwork. It had some shikshi that was drawn on the streams, etc., when they were having again special guests each time, and they had G draw the guest character, and so on. It also has 3 short stories with some illustrations. One of them actually got into Ikabe later on. But yeah, basically it's not, I wouldn't even call it an art book. It's just a thing you can collect for the pretty art inside.
sell it on eBay in 10 years. I'm sure it'll be like it'll
I
cost like
sure
millions.
hope so.
And I think the next art book we actually got was the one we got from the Kickstarter.
Yes, it's the only art book that was released in English,
Yes.
and I think it's one of the best ones actually.
Yes,
I
it's
didn't
fair.
actually see it in my own hands, but I figure that if it brings together all the first 4 art books that have been released way before, then it doesn't actually have any redundant content inside.
Yeah, it
Uh,
doesn't.
Yes, so it's more of a complete package than the same box with the 4 art books laid out separately.
Yes, and I think we got an extra, and we also got an extra booklet.
Yes. Alright. And does it have any short stories?
It doesn't. I don't think so.
So,
Well, art books are kind of don't necessarily
yes, you don't
always
read
have this
them,
kind of stuff.
so to say.
But yeah, you don't. No, you do. There is some reading in the end. Like
Well, yeah.
actually, Kajiri Kamui Kagura has like a Q&A with Masuda in the end, which is kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
interesting.
right. And where he mentioned like the 8th and the 9th thrones, I think.
Yeah. So there's also
Anyway, this brings us to this new art book and the main question at hand. will people actually buy it? What do you think?
Yes, yes, because it's Dies Irae and the fans are very
Is it
devoted.
really that simple?
For starters, yes, it is. But I'm not sure if I'll buy it. I might. I'll probably snap and buy
Like,
it. But
I can see myself buying it because I don't have any other art books myself.
yeah,
But you already have like most of the stuff that will be there. Like, I assume it will have all the CGs from Ikabe, Dies Irae, from Kajiri Kamui Kagura.
I'm actually not sure. Maybe it will, but I feel like when you have like an art book that has all the CGs in it, it tends to be really. It naturally tends to make the book a lot more bulky. And
Yes,
they
it's
said
400
400
pages after all.
and and they said 400 pages, so it might, but I don't know. They have like a lot of games to cover, so
Well,
if they go
like,
through,
I can only compare it to the Muramasa fan book that I have, and it's like twice as short, and a lot of the CGs in it are actually not of that high quality. Like, they can put on the cover has each and every CG from the game, but inside it's not actually uh, each and every CG you care about, really. So like
yeah,
each page has
they tend to
uh,
cover more like scene highlights,
yes,
big
yes,
fights and stuff like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So in the end, they can actually put each and every CG and each and every promo art inside, but really for me it feels like Pantheon is the main selling point here. Like
It
they
is.
have figured out, they have realized that people have high demand for Pantheon, and now they can use it to sell each and every thing they are going to release in the next year or so, which we will touch upon later on. Imagine that you are hyped for Pantheon, as we are, and you want to know everything about it. You buy this art book, and inside you get like the same pictures you got on the postcards from the Blu-rays, and the main visual that's mentioned is like Ren and Mari from the official website. Would you feel that this art book is still worth your money?
Of course I won't, but again, it depends on a lot of factors. For example, like for you, you might get it because you don't have enough art book.
Yes.
And a lot of fans will, like I said, the fans are devoted. They'll get anything DS related because it's DS related. They don't care. We'll touch on it later, but I'm pretty sure. I almost know that there are fans out there that got every release on every console of DS Irae because it's
Yes.
DS Irae.
Yes. That's
And
true.
so yes, I don't think it's a problem. It will sell. It will sell. There's no question there. The question is, should you, as in
The
me
listener.
or you or the listener or whoever, buy it? And it's very much a personal question that depends a lot on
Yes.
your a
Do
lot on
keep in
your
mind that it will cost like uh, 4,000 yen, I believe, which is about
4,000.
$40 before you even count the shipping. And since it's huge and heavy, it will probably cost a lot to ship. But yeah, I think that it really depends on your personal case, and personally, I probably won't buy it after all. But uh, if you have some spare income, more power to you. And mm, and I do believe that a lot of new fans has come after the anime has come out, and this
The
is
translation come out, yeah.
yes, that too. So it's really the perfect time to release something like this to get them up to speed with the veteran fans. All right, so I think this is all we have to say on this subject. But it's only the first of the three news that were released. So good on you, Light. We do have something to talk about. The second subject is actually another release of Dies Irae itself, which will be ported to Nintendo Switch. This port will be digital only. It will be released on September 27th. It will actually have a new theme song performed by Sakakibara Yui, from what I believe, and it
Of
will
course.
actually have new content inside. It will have at least one new scenario. It will have extra CGs drawn by Jiyusuke, of course, and this new scenario, written by Masada, of course, will in some way connect to Pantheon. So, like I said, uh, Light are trying to use Pantheon to promote each and every new product that they release, which is actually a logical thing to do. I don't blame them. And this is actually why a lot of people are really excited about this port. Even if it's, like I said, just the same old game that you and I have already read. And like the only thing you will get out of it is this small new scenario. And because of that, a lot of people are a bit, I wouldn't say angry, they just annoyed by the fact that Light have been releasing various versions of DS for ages now. Like the game is 10 years old actually.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a bit more than that. But the very first version was not good at all. So they released another version like a year ago, and that was
A year later.
yes, that was justified because Masada himself actually wrote it this time, so it was like an apology. So you actually even got a free patch to set up on your Elder Scrolls Zarathustra version, which allowed you to get
The new
new
scenarios.
new
Yeah.
scenario. But even then, it wasn't actually complete yet. It only had 2 scenarios out of 4. Do note that Elder Scrolls Zarathustra was promoted as having 4 scenarios, but it was released with only 2. So, okay, I got the timetable before me. The first version was released on December 21st, 2007. Elder Scrolls Zarathustra Die Wiederkunft was released on June 24th, 2009. So we actually had an anniversary not too long ago. It was just the same 2 scenarios, Kasumi and Mari, but rewritten by Masada himself. Then, on December 25th, 2009, so a bit less, no, like exactly half a year later, they released Dies Irae Actes Fabula, which now contained all 4 scenarios. And it also had like a patch version. You still had to pay for it, but you didn't have to pay for it all, so you could spend 5,000 yen and patch the new content in. And then 3 years later, on June 28th, which is actually today in Japan, on 2012, they released Dies Irae Amantes Amentes, which was actually a port to PlayStation Portable, so it cut all the 18 plus content, but it actually added some scenarios which adapted the drama CDs which had come out by that time, and added 2 more scenarios on top of it, because Masada is that kind to us. And then on August 31st of the same year, it was released on PC with no changes at all, like just PC.
Happy birthday, Amame.
Yes. And then we also had a port on Android. It was released on August 19th, 2015 on Android, and December 2nd, 2016 on iOS. It didn't add anything new, it just was a port to mobile devices, which is actually what the English version is using right now. It also had the visuals in higher definition. And that's basically it. And then we also had the English version, which promised to bring all these different versions together, but then the 18 plus patch was actually just Arctes Fabula translated into English, which is not that good, but okay. Anyways, so people are kinda annoyed that Light are selling the same game over and over again, and now they also have to buy a Switch to read the new scenario. Alright, what do you think about it?
Well, people reacted badly to it, I'd say. But I think it's a bit misguided.
Yes.
Because, for starters, Light didn't invent the idea of ports. And,
Certainly wish they did.
yes. Ports are a thing. If you want to talk about... I can think of a lot of examples of games that have been released over and over again. Not one of them is Skyrim, by the way. But the thing is, there's also... Irae have been released repeatedly on different consoles over and over again. Fate Stay Night has been like that, for example. Muv-Luv Alternative has been like that. Even Ruyotomo Yobu, by the way, has been released like on several consoles. The problem is not with the existence of a port, but rather that the port came out less than a year after the latest version. The latest version being the HD version, which came out in the month of the box.
Right. I completely forgot about it.
Yes, you forgot about the HD version.
That we did get a PC version that's translated into English, and that's what we get on Steam. But Japan also got the same version released over there, but they are sold as usually in boxes. It's a physical release. It's actually two physical releases. It's Amame and Arctes
Fabula.
Yes, so
and it's widescreen. That's the point. The idea is that it's widescreen.
Yes. That's the selling point over there.
Yes, that's a selling point, exactly. It's the HD version, the anniversary version for the anime.
Yes.
And that's really my issue, that they released it in less than a year. And you could have, I don't know, they could have, like, released a port for the PS4 or something, and then a port for the Switch. Or they could have...
Would it really make any difference?
It kind of would, in a way that, like... my problem isn't that they release a port. My problem is that they're releasing two versions of the same game less than a year apart. That's my issue. If they would have released
if they released it on PS4, what would that change?
It wouldn't change much, but my point is if they would have released a PS4 and a PC version concurrently. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If they would have used it to like release it on a multi-platform,
so like
setting, that would have been.
Hey, we are going to port it anyway, so why not release it now?
Exactly. So because it's a semantics thing. When you release the game for like multi-platform, people are like, oh, okay, cool, multi-platform, I can play it on but when you release it just for the Switch in its own release, or with pyrotechnics and everything, then people are like, oh, but you're releasing it again, you're milking the franchise, etc., etc.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
So that's the thing. Another matter is that people, I get the feeling people might feel like they're locking Pantheon information behind a console release.
Well, I wouldn't say so.
And I don't think it is, mostly because, like, with Amame being a good example,
yes.
it'll get a PC release, and more than that, because it's a digital only release. I'm fairly sure they'll release a PC version physically
Yes,
because
yes, of course.
because it's a chance for them to make more money.
And like I said, there was a bit more than 2 months difference between two different versions of Amami. So even if they didn't actually announce it now, I do believe that we will get a PC version maybe this winter or something like that.
Maybe. Let's hope so.
What does confuse me though is that the subtitle is, from what I believe, is still Amame, even if it has a new theme song, it has new content inside. So it would actually make more sense to give it some different subtitle, but they didn't.
Um, it kind of wouldn't. I guess they do kind of want to keep Amantis Amentis as like the main subtitle for Dies Irae. I mean, the manga is also Amantis Amentis.
Well, I suppose.
And Amantis Amentis is like a very Mari specific line, so it's
Yes, and now when we live in the huge Shinza world with consequent throne, this idea of passing the torch to Mari is a bit more pronounced in the overall franchise. So it
Yes.
makes sense to highlight it this way. Although I wouldn't mind if they just made up a different subtitle that still had this theme.
There's merit to that, if only because it would be a lot less confusing.
Yes, yes. Well, still, do keep in mind that it was only announced on the official stream, and we don't even have the official website open yet. So they might actually change it while we aren't looking. Actually, it's something I didn't mention before, but the art book we mentioned today was actually leaked on Amazon before it was really revealed on the stream, but it had a different name. It had uh, Dies Irae Complete Unenerbe or something like that.
Yeah.
So basically, it was a working title on the Amazon page. This Amazon page was open on the exactly same day Light revealed this project, and 6 to 7 hours later, they revealed its actual title. So this is like some miscommunication, I suppose, which might actually be the case here as well.
I wouldn't put it past Light.
Yes, always doubt Light.
Yes.
Anyways, so either way, if you don't have a Switch, don't feel too pressured to go outside and buy it right now, because they will release it later on. And even if they don't, you will get the most important info out of it from people who do have Switch and do buy it, and just talk about it on the internet.
Yes.
We certainly will.
Hmm.
Even if I don't have a Switch.
I don't have a Switch either, and I don't
Well,
think
there
I'll.
you go.
And I don't think I'll get one by the time by September
Yeah,
27th.
there aren't that many games we really have to play on the Switch. Like there's Bayonetta, it's good, but well, let's see. Alright, moving on. The third snippet of info we got was actually the most exciting, I believe. It's the anime soundtrack, which is actually coming out. We were a bit worried about it because it wasn't included in the Blu-rays, and that's where anime soundtrack usually is. But none of the free Blu-ray boxes had it, so we were kind of wondering, are they going to release it at all? And they actually are. The anime host is going to come out on the same day as the art book that we mentioned, so August 10th. and it still has Keiichi Yonao working on the tracks. And I actually don't have much to say about it, other than the anime has great soundtrack. Even
It
those
does.
people who don't like how it turned out all agree that the soundtrack is one of its strongest points. And since it has a lot of remix tracks from the original game, you can even see how much Yanao Sensei has grown over time, because after all, as I mentioned, this is more than 10 years old already, and that covers the soundtrack as well. And over these 10 years, Yanao Sensei has written a lot of new music and has made some huge progress. Uh, you could hear it in Kajiri Kamui Kagura, although it had some different style to it, so it wasn't that easy to compare between this and Kajiri. But then you also had Senshinkan, which is, from what I hear, is like his best work so far.
In my opinion, it is, yes.
Yes, so uh, I uh, I do feel like I have to actually read it before judging it properly. But the few tracks that I do have some sort of attachment to, like it's not actually that major. Like I know it's associated with this character or that character, and it's usually enough to sell me on it. Uh, Kira's theme is excellent. Paraiso was actually I wasn't that excited about it, but
No,
after you released.
Paraiso isn't huge. I think the track people usually remember is Yoshua, though.
Is that the one that was in the drama that you translated a few days
No,
ago? No?
no, it wasn't. No, Yoshua is the one from the prologue. If you know it, it's the big battle theme one.
Oh, okay, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So basically, that short episode that you translated also sold me on this background track, because it like grows along the way, and it really sells me on both these characters
Yes.
and the plot in general.
Yes. Bensenjin's soundtrack is kind of I wouldn't call it a step down, but it's a lot more mixed in my opinion. Like Senshinkan is, in my opinion, his best soundtrack, not just because the tracks are good, but because it's consistently good. I can't think of a single track in the soundtrack I don't like. I can't name a single one, and it's unique. I can't say this about a lot of soundtracks.
Yeah, what it
Uh,
usually comes down to is that some tracks are just that, they are background noise for the game.
exactly,
But
exactly.
here, well, I won't judge it before reading it, but I can see it actually being like another like color palette for each episode.
Yes.
Anyway, after Ban's Engine, we actually had a brand new soundtrack for Dies Irae, which was for Ikabe, and it really was excellent. It didn't have that many tracks, but uh, like you said, each and every track is memorable.
It's a very Senshinkan-esque soundtrack. It's like it feels like in around Senshinkan was around the time when kind of settled on a style, so to speak. I
Yes,
mean,
came into
uh,
his own.
yes, came into a zone, I guess. Yes, I've heard complaints. I mean, I'm not musically gifted, but I've heard complaints from friends of mine that are musicians that they have issues with Dies Irae soundtracks because the instruments there aren't real instruments there. Apparently, it's all electronic instruments.
Oh
But
yeah,
they don't like
I
it.
can see it.
Like the guitars, they don't like it. They don't like the guitars, the electric guitars, which are very prominent in some tracks, like Schreiber's,
Yeah.
because they're not real guitars. So it feels like it improved. It feels apparently the newer soundtracks have real instruments in them.
Yes.
Another point is that, and this is something from the Dies Irae radio, when they released Pantheon's theme song,
Yes,
Fanatic,
right.
they played it one time, and apparently the next episode, Yu and Yan told us that Yono listened to it and basically phoned in and said, "Listen, guys, I want to record I want to record it again with live guitar." So basically, came in and recorded it again with live guitar.
Yes.
So you can see he's definitely with a very hands-on approach when it comes to Dies Irae's music, and it shows in the anime as well. It had some great track remixes. The biggest one that comes to mind is Trud Valkyrie, Beatrice's theme and Kay's theme.
Oh, I actually didn't had that one in mind. I had Einherjar Rubedo and the how's it called? Trifas theme from the last trailer.
Yes, Lohengrin.
Yes, yes, right. So you can really feel the opera uh, from it, and it was actually one of my main concerns about this, that you have an entire story built upon the theme of opera, from the superpowers to the structure of the story itself, and your music doesn't actually reference any operas. Why is that?
That's not true. That's not true.
Well, I suppose it does reference the series itself, and some of its tracks are a bit high-spirited, if I say. So, nah,
Your favorite character's theme is very opera-esque, and
yes,
it's also
yes.
named after an opera. So
It's part of why I actually liked him so much, I suppose. So, I just listen.
we're talking about Goas, in case you haven't noticed all the
Yes, guts.
unless you haven't noticed who his favorite character is, which is well, it's everywhere for
Yes.
him. Same for
Uh,
me, but yes.
yes. So, basically, I'm very excited to actually have a listen to the complete soundtrack. I might actually buy it because it's just the things I like supporting. And in general, even if you don't like how the anime turned out, if you have some way to support the aspects that you did like, I believe you should do it. So you don't have to buy the Blu-rays if you believe that it did a bad job with the story you like. But if you believe that the soundtrack is good, and it is, then you should at least support that much. Well, in my opinion, anyways.
I agree.
Alright, so that's actually everything that we got last Friday. Well, besides the shop and its many different selling goods. Like there's bath water with Reinhardt on it. I suppose it smells like Reinhardt or something like that.
I have a very clear image of what Reinhardt smells like, and I'm not sure I want to bathe in. Well, I do want to bathe in that, but I don't want to bathe in.
Well, actually, I think that they said that it's not that strong of a smell. But anyways,
That it's not Reinhardt.
it is on sale. They also had like bath roses like that like melt in water and they are Wilhelm themed. So you can have a blood bath.
A bathrobe, a bath that melts in water. What? Okay,
Yeah, something like that.
it sounds very counterproductive to what a robe should do, but okay,
Well, rose.
I
A-
guess.
It's a buff rose.
Okay. I misheard you. I thought it's a bathrobe.
Well, I suppose there is some market for that as well. but not this time.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's all the news we have for this week, and hopefully we will have some more next time. Hopefully, because like we said, there will be a new uh, uh,
Stream.
new stream this Saturday. Yes, and there are some news that we didn't actually cover on this podcast that we might cover next time, that are related to Spine and the guillotine and pro wrestling. It's
Pro
actually
wrestling.
pretty confusing to me even to this point, but hopefully we will have something to discuss after it actually takes place. Well, anyways, for our main subject of the day, we were going to start discussing the anime a bit more in depth. We had some discussion on it last time, but this time I figured that since we are getting the last episodes on this Sunday, we might as well recap everything that happened up to this point. And just like the official stream of the new episodes will have a recap episode, we will have a few recap episodes of our own. So today we will going to discuss the first 6 episodes of the anime and just talk about the ups and downs of it. What we liked about it, what we didn't really like about it, how it changes the source material, what we wish they would have done differently, and so on. So, the very first episode on our plate is perhaps one of the most controversial ones. So, episode 0, titled Daybreak, covers the events of the year 1939, when Reinhard meets Mercurius and the rest of the soon-to-be LDO. They also raise Berlin in the same episode, and we are transported to the present day through some sort of reverse flashback. Anyways, uh, first thing first, did they have to release it before everything else?
I think that was one of their biggest mistakes. Putting aside there's a lot to pick apart with this episode.
Yes, yes. So we'll go.
There's a lot to pick apart with this episode, but I think one of their biggest problems was that they did put episode 0 as the first episode being aired because, to put it in context, episode 0 is the second side story that unlocks when you finish when you finish Kasumi's route.
Yes,
It's important.
For some more context, it's actually an adaptation of the audio drama, which was released on August 15th of 2008. So if you are keeping up, it was after Aizu sprach Zarathustra was released, but before the actual proper version of the script was.
Yes. So, my problem with this is that it's not an introductory episode. It's a backstory episode, but the kind of backstory episode you're supposed to watch when you're actually when you actually know the characters. It doesn't introduce them. It elaborates on their motivations and how they became what they were. It's an origin
even
story.
Do that really in the anime at least.
No, in the anime it doesn't, but that's another issue.
Oh.
But it's basically a prequel episode that shows how the villains came to be. You
Yes.
can't. So it lacks a lot of context. Another matter is that this episode didn't actually focus on any character other than Reinhard and Mercurius, which is a
Yes.
problem in and of itself. Like I said, characters are thrown in without any context. Maybe if you'd have watched the episode, if you would have approached it while knowing, for example, who Valerian Triffa is and what defines his character, his interactions with Anna would have made more sense.
Yes.
If you would have known who Eleonora would become, then seeing her in Beatrice in 1949 might have elicited a different reaction out of you. But when you see it for the first time, it's just who are these characters?
Well,
So yeah,
do keep in mind that this anime was a product of crowdfunding, so it was made by fans for fans. So it wasn't really that much of an issue that the audience won't recognize anyone.
I don't feel this is a fair thing to say
Well,
because
yes, of course.
because the anime isn't just for the fans, it's also there to attract new audiences.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like this also serves as one of the animes, well, not the entire animes, but specifically episode Zero's issues, that I feel like there were a lot of promises like, yes, Beatrice will appear, yes, Lotus will appear, and all this, and they had to find ways to fit them into the show, even though the route they're in doesn't actually allow for them to appear as
Do
they
you
were.
think they made that promise before actually writing the script or after it?
They may have made it. I don't think they made it. They might have made a promise after the script, but they were aware. They were probably aware that there is pressure from the fans to see these characters.
Yeah, I suppose.
Beatrice is a very popular character. People would want to see her.
Yes.
Lotus is a character he is in his own way a popular character. People would want to see him. They knew all that. They knew people would want to see Kai, so they would find a way to fit Kai in. But
Well, they kind of have to if they want to develop Kei's backstory and stuff.
yes, but Kei's backstory gets developed in Mari's route even without directly seeing Kai. But then
I suppose.
you do come to it with you are supposed to come to it with one or two routes of backstory, like already with you knowing already
Yes.
two.
If nothing else,
What's a
it kind
backstory?
of spoils the huge twists of Trifa's character, of Lisa's character to a smaller extent, because she's revealed to be part of LDO pretty early on. It kind of spoils Schreiber's twist. Like, really, since Diaz's story is not that complicated, actually, most of its twists come from the backstories of its characters. So showing a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot, in the very first episode that's shown to the general audience is kinda iffy.
Yes.
That said, some people watch Fate Zero before Fate Stay Night, and I don't blame them. So I can see people just thinking, oh, I just want to watch it in chronological order. So
Yes, but that's an erroneous approach, especially with something like Dies Irae. But
that said, it could have been an option to watch it before everything else. They could have released it like right now between these two
yes, that's what I thought.
huge
I would
seasons.
think.
So and when a new person picks it up, they could decide for themselves if they want to watch it in chronological order or in the order it was released on TV, so to say. But we don't really have that option, and so a lot of first opinions were shaped by episode 0 and not by episode 1. And it didn't go well.
Well, there was a lot of obvious backlash because of content issues, and I'm not sure it would have been that much different. Not a lot different.
Well,
they released episode 1 first,
but episode 0 basically introduces them as the protagonists of the story.
yes, that's the big issue. And episode 1 shows them as the antagonists, so it's kind of a difference. But I don't know. I feel like people who are opposed to having this kind of content in general would have probably not have liked Dies Irae, regardless of the order they'd watched it. But that's besides the point. That's besides the point. Uh,
I'm a bit
every
more optimistic than that.
I don't know. Maybe some people are more flexible than that. Some are not. But, and that's fine. Not everything is for everyone, and I do think this is definitely one of those works that aren't for everyone. It's also it's a very violent work. It's a very dark work.
It's a
It's not
very
for.
long work.
It's a very long work. It's a very. Some people don't like the purple prose aspect of it all. They find it pretentious.
Yes, it
It's not, it's not for everyone. So it's fine that not everyone liked it, but I do think that the problem with episode 0 is that it's badly made. I can't say it in any other way. It's badly made. It's arguably the worst directed episode in the anime,
yes, I suppose. It
and
had a lot of things it didn't do. Like it did show us the main driving force behind Reinhardt, and it's actually pretty important in the grand scale of things. But before doing that, before going on the major scale, they should have done it on the minor scale. So, like, why do we care about this story? We care about it because Ren is so similar to every one of us, because we all want to preserve these small precious moments of our lives. And these evil Nazis want to destroy it. And that's how you actually introduce the general conflict. Not from the antagonist's point of view, because it's actually pretty difficult to emphasize with it. You don't really feel like you are trapped in this ghetto that you have to get out of. You have to
yes,
destroy the entire world. So it really makes them memorable, sure. It makes them really charismatic, but the very thing that makes them so memorable is what makes them unrealistic.
I think like a big issue is you said about the feeling of being trapped in the ghetto. Not having Mercurius's opening monologue is. I know,
Yes, that
I
too.
know, I know, I know. Anime is
Even
very.
introducing the Marco Schmidt and the other,
No, Marcus Schmidt and the others are like, okay, I can understand. Like I was going to say now, I understand that anime is very limited in time. It's something that I noticed when I subbed the anime, how densely packed together the lines were. How they were.
yes,
I could feel that they were fighting for every second of screen time they could get because there's a lot of dialogue to fit in. So I can realize that putting like a 3 to 4 minute long monologue is a little, probably impossible, but it really did help set the mood. It really did help create the
yes,
the, the, the
yes,
thematic feel of the ghetto. So when Reinhardt and Mercurius are talking about it cryptically a couple of hours into the game, you're not entirely clueless about what they're talking about.
yes.
But like, I feel like maybe if they had made episode 0 more like just based on the epilogue instead of the second side story, it might have been a little better.
They could have also made it an hour long, like they did in Fate Zero again.
It's a budget thing. They didn't have that kind of budget, I
Well,
feel.
it's more
But
like if they moved their episode count towards the prologue, so to say.
yes,
So we would have one less episode for the later parts and one more episode for the prologue.
but another issue is that I feel like in that case, episode 0 still wouldn't have been taken well because it does kind of show Nazi soldiers in a positive
Yeah,
light.
yeah, I suppose.
It would have been received kind of badly, I feel like, but especially because people who just watch episode 0 and kind of drop it there don't care for the context.
Yes.
So understandable, but I do feel like, at least as someone who's not a new viewer, I feel like maybe having episode 0 be the prologue instead of that would have been a little better. I would have been fine with it even being 20 minutes and cutting out some content, so long as it actually, established them as the threat and put things into perspective.
Yeah.
Because the one thing episode 0 didn't do is give you perspective. You have no idea who these people are. Things happen seemingly at random. Nothing makes sense. The direction is all over the place.
And
It's
they don't even show that they actually burn Berlin itself. So if they actually like emphasized like uh, some well-known Berlin sites that they're like burning down Brandenburg Gate or something like that. Then you would like get the idea. Oh, they're not Nazis. They're much worse.
Yes, but and it's especially funny because they actually did put a lot of research into like German monuments and stuff like that.
Yes,
Like
yes.
it is a good representation of Berlin in terms of like how it looks and what sites are in there and what the
And you
weapons.
also have Beatrice, who was born in Berlin and who actually opposes LDO because they burned it down to some degree.
Yes, to some degree. Yes, you can say a lot. It's lacking in a lot of matters, but episode zero was the sum of a lot of directional mistakes, and I think most everyone will agree that episode zero was just a train wreck and a mistake.
Now, here's a tough one. What did it do well? What did you like
Um,
about it?
I like Mercurious's performance in this episode. I feel like his performance was actually really well made, really well in character,
And well
really
animated.
but better animated in a lot of things in this episode. Yes, they did get the theatrical kind of
Yes, yes.
feel in him well. Reinhard had some good moments. There were some quality moments with Reinhard as well, especially a certain famous cut with his chin. But otherwise,
Right.
Reinhard looked fine in this episode, and that's about it.
Oh, well,
Uh,
the last scene where they burned down Berlin was also pretty good in my mind. Like, it wasn't that well drawn, I'd say that, but I just enjoyed seeing all these people I know doing the stuff they love. Like, you had Helga coming out, you had Sakurai Musashi, which we have seen for the very first time in his actual combat attire with his
then we saw him in his combat attire in Ikabe as well.
well, we did, but we didn't see how his weapon looks like. And
Okay.
we had Spine, we had Isaac, we had Rusalka.
Yeah, all that is true, but it was all momentary. It was all like little
Yes,
cuts, and it was all without context. So you know.
yes. But I'm actually surprised you didn't mention Rusalka as the best thing of the episode.
Well, it wasn't. Sadly enough, it wasn't like the shine episode where she shined in. I feel like.
Yes, neither was this route really, but alright.
C'est la vie.
So I think that's all we have to say about episode 0. Uh, Probably one of the worst, although we will have some other contenders later on. And
Yes.
let's move on to episode first. The Girl in the Twilight, where we have Ren leaving the hospital. Before that we have Ren fighting his best friend, of course. Then we have Ren leaving the hospital, seeing the guillotine, having Mary's vision, having a nightmare about being executed, talking with Rhea Senpai on the roof, and Rusalka and Wilhelm arriving to Shambhala. So, this episode was much more well received than the last one,
Yes. Yes, it was.
which is kinda makes for like a seesaw pattern of the anime in general. Like you have a pretty bad episode and a good episode, and they
Kind of,
change.
yeah.
Yeah. So, why was it so good?
I think Dies Irae's the animation's biggest strength, biggest strongest moments are not in the action scenes, but in the character
Yes,
interaction,
yes,
in the
exactly.
slice of life segments.
People
Um,
don't really appreciate it that much when they pick up a game because they hear that this game has very cool villains and very cool fights and they want to get to it as soon as possible and then you have six or so chapters of slice of life and it's even worse in the
I
Kasumi route.
I think that in the Dies Irae has I do agree that Dies Irae generally has kind of a it's kind of a slog at the beginning. It doesn't
Yes,
really pick up until around the bridge battle, really. But
but really as you go on you really appreciate all those episodes that came
yeah, yeah,
before.
it's set up. It's definitely set up,
Yes,
and you kind of learn to appreciate. You kind of learn to appreciate Ren's everyday life, as you should, because
yes,
that's a major theme.
yes.
Um, I feel like it's like this episode is a good example of that because I feel the sheer fight was it was okay. I don't
Yeah,
have any.
we
I
already
don't
had
really.
it in the first trailer, but it was actually changed, I believe.
It was a bit changed, and I mean it's okay. It's good. I don't feel too strongly about it one way or the other.
It was
Um,
enough,
yes, it was enough. Then we had Kasumi, of course.
which
Uh,
also was voiced by a new voice actor.
she had her voice actress changed, and people were very skeptical about that. But
Yes,
I feel that she did a very good
yes,
job
she did.
because the her old voice actress, by the way, retired
Yes,
from the business, so they had to find a new voice actress. I feel she did a very good job in getting
yes,
all the tomboyish, annoying,
yes.
screechy costume feel.
And the
Uh,
animation really sold it as well, because really, what you have to keep in mind is that the anime is a visual medium, unlike visual novel, ironically enough. So you have to use its strongest points. So you have to use animation to do what you couldn't do in the visual novel. So really having Kasumi moving about and just tucking a trend and so on was really what I came to expect from the anime.
Yes. So in that regard, it was good. Rhea Senpai, by the way, was incredibly cute in this episode.
Yes.
Rhea has this thing with me. I have this thing with her, to be exact, where I feel like her sprite in the visual novel is extremely kind of static. I feel like it doesn't really show off her character because you got to realize, like, I
Well,
like
she
her.
really does keep it to herself. It's one of her major themes. Like she is a bit closed-minded, but
She's
then
introverted a bit.
yes,
Yes.
yes, and
Um,
then she has friends, and they make her like uh,
open,
mm,
kind of open up, I guess.
yes, yes,
But the thing is that this is kind of I'm taking this a bit in a personal direction. But Rhea has a design that I would usually be crazy for. Like I like the air color, the eye color. Like usually I would be really big on her design, but for some reason in the visual novel, I wasn't really kind of. I didn't find her extreme. I thought she was cute, but I didn't find her extremely gorgeous.
like
In the anime, I thought she was gorgeous.
yes, yes,
And I feel like the anime actually managed to really bring out her good character design. Like, if you look, for example, at her Elio tapestry design, I think she's gorgeous there. But the visual novel doesn't quite bring it out. The anime does, though, and that's something that I'll have to say in its favor. Um, but yes, the guillotine scene was it was okay. I guess it's kind of like Shiro saying. I feel like
yeah.
it was sufficient.
I do have to mention that it was the first time we get the actual singing version of Mari's song because in the visual novel you just have separate lines that she reads and that's it. But now we
Yes,
have the tune which is actually quite catchy. We have the actual song performed by her and performed by the crowd, which was actually
that's
composed
episode
of
two, I think.
the people who crowdfunded the anime.
Masada included too. I think.
Yes. It has some Easter eggs like the line stamp.
Yes.
Alright, so the line stamp. Let's talk about the line stamp. I thought
Yes.
Shinza verse was within the Senshinkan verse, but now it's the other way around.
Yes, it's basically there's a very famous line by Senshin Khan's antagonist Amakasu, where he's like goes banzai, banzai, banzai. Uh,
Banzai!
and yes, so there's that there. So basically, when Reyes sends Ren the line message in the game, it was a text message, but the anime is somewhat more advanced, and they had line back in 2006. But
Well,
she
I
basically,
think it's 2016 after all. But
well, we don't
well,
know, we don't know,
yes,
but
it's not specified, and that's I think is the best option they had.
I guess, yeah. But it basically the sticker had a Makasu going banzai, and
Yes.
all the Shinza fans went crazy. But yes.
So now we are expecting Amakase in Pantheon because it's apparently the same universe.
I would love to see that. I love Amakasu
How much money would you spend for Amakase?
a lot.
Alright, so and we also have the final scene where we have Wilhelm and Rusalka arriving to the town, and it actually has the first iteration of what would soon become like a leitmotif of LDO, like these animated skulls.
Yes, Masada actually tweeted after this episode
Yes,
aired. Did all the thing
he
with the
tweeted a
skulls.
lot after each episode,
Yes,
like
after each episode,
explain
he
stuff.
yeah, or give commentary.
Yes.
But he basically said that the skulls were something that he actually intended to put into the visual novel, but he couldn't. And if you played and like having played the original release, not exactly the original release, but having played Actes Fabula, I can see why Actes Fabula is a very like that version of the Malia engine is very is a bit static. I feel like, and the visual novel is in general not extremely like the visual effects aren't very dynamic. Fate Stay Night came out in 2004 and was a lot more dynamic than Dies
Yeah,
Irae,
yeah.
sadly. So it's basically something that he wanted to put into the visual novel but couldn't. All the flashing red skulls on them, which,
Yes,
like you said,
basically,
appear later on.
in the visual novel, you don't really feel that these people are like superhuman monsters that have
It,
thousands
it's
or tens of
it is
thousands of
it is
souls and stuff.
described in text though. It is described in text.
Yes, but really, it's not as striking when you read about it. After all, we take in most of the information visually. So
Yep.
seeing is
Believing, as they say.
yes, basically. So I actually think that this scene still didn't do a perfect job. Like, oh, skulls, spooky. You don't really uh, make the connection between the skulls and the souls which are contained within them.
I
But you
guess.
do in the next episode, so I suppose it was enough. It was actually pretty nicely animated from the visual standpoint. Like you have this bridge, and you have the light and the shadow, and when the light passes by, you have the shadows of the skulls, and it
Hmm.
was pretty well done, I think.
Hmm.
So overall, this episode really was a much better first impression, I suppose. Not only because
Yes.
of the topic, not only because the script was better handled, but also because it was just a more tight package, which didn't leave out much, if anything, and it just uh, used its strong points as it should have. Alright, I think that's enough for episode 1, and we move on to episode 2, The Fangs of the Beast, which is basically split into two parts. In the first part, we have Ren coming to realization that maybe all his murders are connected to his nightmares. We have him and Kasumi meeting Father Trifa on the street. We have them visiting Rhea in the church, seeing Lisa for the first time. Well, it's actually the second time in the anime. Anyway, so there was some of that. There was a short cameo by Shiro, and then Ren goes to sleep, wakes up in
The park.
Yes, he sees a disemboweled body. He meets Rusalka. He meets Wilhelm. They get sort of a fight, which was more one-sided, if anything. And then Kay interrupts them, and they they move on into his school, which was one of the which brought a lot of reactions from the new watchers, like, "Oh my God, they actually did it!"
Yes.
Like all of that, all was other anime. All right, so this episode was a bit more difficult to evaluate, I think, because it was a bit more discrete. Like it had two very separate parts to it, which are pretty different to each other.
Yes, they're very different in tone. The first half was fine for the most part. Like,
It's
it's an okay adaptation of what it was of the scenes it was trying to adapt. I feel like it wasn't. I didn't feel anything was missing that was too bad.
again, it's slice of life. You don't really have to go out of your way to make it excellent.
Yes, but it was satisfying for what.
Yes, you had Trifa's hijinks, which was actually, I think, handled a bit better than in the manga, for example.
I actually had a very clear vision of what was going on. Like Triffa getting kind of. I always imagine him like wobbling to them, like kind of walking like a penguin, sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
Like making him a little more goofy. But I don't know. That's just me nitpicking.
Overall, they could have used the super deformed style.
Maybe they could have. I don't know. They could have done.
Didn't do it at all, and I can see why. But
Yeah.
the manga did, and I think that it didn't really do any bad for it.
Yeah, but I think that's fine. Now the second half, that's the problematic half of the episode, definitely, because this fight had a lot of problematic bits to it. Putting aside it wasn't as well animated, putting aside it was that it didn't look as good. It also left out some stuff, and this is something that the anime did, and I'm very not sure why it did this. It completely left out any mention of Ren being Zarathustra. And
Yeah, that didn't come up until like episode 8, I believe.
That didn't come out at all, actually. He was never named Zarathustra in the anime, period.
No, he was when Professor Ayase had him in his box.
Even then, he wasn't named Zarathustra. He gave him another name, but he wasn't named Zarathustra.
I suppose.
The Zarathustra name never shows up in the anime at all. And you'd also think if you want to drop the name, that's fine, but the problem is there's absolutely no context as to why Rusalka and Wilhelm are torturing him.
Yeah, so
they just beat up on him randomly, and it's not explained why.
Yeah, so actually Trifa was supposed to give them this mission in the last episode, like, okay, we have fucking Mercurius as representative in this town, you hate him, so you go and fight him. Oh, yeah, we should. And it's not mentioned here at all. I believe it didn't even have any Mercurius exposition in this episode, unlike the visual novel.
No, there was a bit,
There was.
right? There was a bit right before the battle got stopped by Kay.
Oh,
There was a
right,
moment
right.
where he appears with Mari.
Yes.
But yeah, it didn't have that. Now,
Yeah.
there's
I think they actually covered the wrong thing in the exposition. They covered like Mercurius's rule, so to say, and not Ren's connection to him.
yes. Now, I have to say that this is going back to the visual novel. I feel like chapter 2 of the visual novel
Yes.
had a very well written, impactful ending because chapter 2 of the visual novel is called Xenophobia, and and xenophobia is like the theme of the chapter in a lot of ways. You have like for
Yes,
starters, you have Triffa appearing, who's a foreigner and he gets beaten up, so it's a comedic xenophobia.
Yes.
But you also have Wilhelm being basically being racist towards Ren and later towards
As
Kay,
he always is.
and later racist towards Kay, basically calling her
A yellow monkey.
a yellow monkey. Yes, basically, yeah, basically being very racist, very
He's
degrading.
basically the most Nazi-like in ideology of the
Yes,
LDO.
yes. Now, and the episode ends with Rusalka and Kay appearing in the school and Ren describing it as a sense of xenophobia, quote unquote, a fear of the unknown. Um,
Yes,
which
which is a
which
major
is
theme of the work in general.
exactly. So episode 2 actually ends up being a very strong thematic kind of setting, kind of a thematic setter, I guess you'd call it.
Yes.
It sets a theme very strongly in a very memorable way. I still remember getting chills reading it for the first time,
I don't
and
think it made that much of an
it did
impression on me actually. But okay.
it, but it did on me personally. And episode 2, I feel like really fumbled the ball there.
Well,
Um,
all the episodes you mentioned are still there. So, uh,
it is there,
what could it
but it's
have
not
done
framed as
better?
such. It's there, but it's not framed as such, and kind of framing it as such helps. I feel like maybe I hope that maybe someone who just listened to my explanation here kind of and didn't maybe know that might have felt like kind of yeah, it clicks. It's like I can kind of see where he's saying how it might have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
better, like, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is where the visual medium could have helped again. Like, you could have made visual parallels to the scenes of Trifa getting beaten up, Ren getting beaten up, and then the school CG, so to say. But that said, the school scene is very memorable because it's CG. It's reproduced in the manga as well, so you kind of have to fit the rest to it if you wanted to go the visual route, so to say.
I do. I mean, I agree. But I feel like maybe adding, you said how it would have been made better. Maybe adding a little more narration on Ren's side. Maybe
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
adding all those Mercurius bits that were
yeah, some
missing.
of
Because,
his inner voice, maybe.
yes, and maybe adding all those Mercurius bits that were missing because those Mercurius bits were actually, like, they were really good in the sense that they kind of deepened the mystery. It's like, it's like worth saying that, like, you can see that, like, Ren was just about to do something, just
Yeah,
about to
yeah, yeah.
kind of counter Wilhelm, and then it gets interrupted. And it's I personally felt like extremely kind of blue balled in that scene,
Well,
but
yeah.
because I was obviously looking forward to all the crazy action, and that didn't quite happen. But
Wait for 6 more chapters. Or
but
like, four.
there's a well, as we'll go on, we'll talk about
Yeah.
other bits from the first third of the game that I found kind of the anime kind of fumbled on. Scenes I would have liked to see animated but weren't. But yeah, I mean, it's basically what you said. Removing the Mercury scenes is kind of a big deal in my opinion because it really deepens the mystery. It really does. It deepens
Yeah.
the mystery. It deepens the build up. Yeah, it's very unfortunate they removed that, but I don't think the episode like wasn't the worst the show has ever had. I
Well,
feel like
yeah. It had
um,
Rusalka.
Yes, it did. It had Rusalka. She's an angel.
But
But boo. Yes. But we'll
it also had solved to some extent the problem which I mentioned for the last episode, where you don't draw the parallel between the skulls and the power within these people. Like Wilhelm, like takes his hand up and has an entire column of skulls, so to say, and
mhm.
it really drives home just how much impact he puts into his strikes.
Yeah.
Oh, if you didn't guess it by all the
I
destruction
did.
he wreaks on the place. But yeah, you kind of have to keep in mind that you don't have that much time to explain things in the anime. Like we have, what, 9 hours total, and the visual
Something like that.
novel is more than 50. So you have to make some shortcuts, and the visual format actually allows to do it pretty well, like show don't tell, basically.
Hmm.
And this episode actually did it, not to the extent I'd hoped for, but it at least tried.
Hmm.
Alright, so if you don't have anything else to say, I think we can move on
Yep. Sure.
to episode number 3, which we had some. We had a couple of titles for it, but the one we went with was The End of the Nightmare is the Beginning. This is the
Yes.
episode where Ren is getting to the breaking point from trying not to sleep, where Rusalka explains to him some stuff about what's going on in the city, and then we have Kasumi trying to cheer him up and taking him on a date, giving him his necklace as a present, and then you have the scene in the park, which I think I can spoil. Like, there's a scene in the park, which takes most of the second half of the episode. You have more of Mercurius's exposition, and you have Ren finally taking the guillotine into his possession.
Yes.
Alright, so
This
first of
episode,
all,
a lot of the stuff you said, sadly, weren't actually in the anime.
yeah, yes,
They were in the
actually,
visual novel. They weren't in the anime.
yes,
Um,
it actually cut some content from
yes,
this
it did.
episode, but a short scene before the opening was actually added on the Blu-ray.
And that's a scene that explains.
Yes,
It
so
explains a bunch of stuff. It explains, for example, what Rusalka and Kay are doing in the school. It also explains that Ren is basically trying,
to prevent the
uh,
murders that are going on.
yes, to prevent the murders by not going to sleep, because he thinks that when he goes to sleep, the murders take place. Which is why, which is why if you've noticed in the very beginning of the episode, Ren has sacks under his eyes.
Yes,
Is sleep deprived. Um,
that's actually something that the anime improves over the visual novel, because you don't
well,
actually see
see
Ren's
Ren,
face most of the
yes, yeah, you don't
most of
see
the
him.
time.
So, but it would have been It would have been closer to perfect if they'd actually told you that he's not trying to
Well,
sleep.
yeah,
But yes,
thanks for trying.
yes, but okay. So Rusalka explaining stuff to Ren is another issue, because Rusalka doesn't actually explain anything to Ren in the anime,
And to
while
the
and to the
viewer.
viewer, yes.
Yes.
While in the game, she's basically info dumping. It's a funny thing, because Rusalka actually has two big info dump scene where she explains how some things work, how the mechanics in Dies Irae works. The
Surprisingly,
first
she doesn't explain it all still,
she does, no
despite all that.
she doesn't explain it all in the anime.
Well, even in the visual novel, you have like Ren asking her, and who the hell is Zarathustra? Oh well, I have a book I wanna read, and that's about it,
No,
basically.
but no, it's not so much that. She does say that she's like it's like supposed to be representative of Mercurius and
Oh
all that.
yeah, she doesn't go too deeply, basically.
She doesn't go too deeply, but she does provide some
Yes.
information. While in the anime, she provides nothing at all, and I feel that's a big point against this episode. Um, so yeah, we have the cut content, which is a bit of a shame. We have the stuff they didn't quite elaborate on. Then we have the date scene, which was okay. It's a significant scene, and I feel like they did that okay, as they do with a lot of the slice of life
Although I
scenes.
think the ringtone was done better in the visual novel.
Oh yes, definitely. The ringtone is a very memorable part of the visual novel scene, and I've even seen people kind of wish that maybe there would have been another scene involving it, just to kind of the deepen the theme.
Yes,
But
yes. Well,
yeah, but yeah, we have Ren taking back the guillotine, and we have another thing we have Mercurius and the throne, which is an imagery that only the anime kind of really elaborated on.
yes, because
So the
in the
throne
visual
is not.
novel we don't really have the throne, so to say. We see Mercurius in his singularity, but he's like floating in the air, and that's about it. But in the anime, they really went in with the front theme, like they well, really, it's been 10 years, so now they have this huge mythology of seven heavens and seven different gods, so they have decided to like represent it visually. Like I wouldn't be surprised if in the last episode or somewhere like that the throne changes into like Mari's throne.
Yeah.
But overall, it still isn't the exposition that's really needed here, I think. Like,
Yeah, it wasn't.
if we cut out Mercurius and added back the cut episode where Rusalka explains everything, this episode could have been done better.
Definitely, it's some cut content, and I feel like this is something that I should kind of preface before we go any deeper. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of fans, complain about changed content, and it'll become probably more relevant on the 6 episodes that we'll be
Yeah,
discussing
yes,
next time.
yes.
But people complained a lot about stuff that was changed or added. I don't think additions are inherently a bad thing.
No, no.
A lot of this is stuff that must have added knowingly.
Yes.
I feel the problem, if anything, is cut content, and this is a glaring issue in this episode.
Yes, I suppose, but you do have to keep in mind that the anime only has one route to explore, and even the common route is not really the most exciting thing that you want to show in the anime. So you kinda, on one hand, you want to be done with it as soon as possible, so you get to the cool stuff in the Mari route. But on the other hand, it does have a lot of stuff that you have to show. You have to explain to the viewer. Like, it's one thing when you skip the common route when you have already gotten to the Mari route after reading one or two other routes. But when it's the very first time you see it, you really uh, don't have the option to just skim over it.
Yes, but that said, I feel like the murders could have been expressed perhaps a bit better, and like
Yes, yes.
it's obvious that they didn't have a lot of time, but it feels like there was more
And they
build up in the
didn't
visual
really
novel.
care about it that much either because it was again for the fans and the fans already know all this stuff. Although
Yeah.
it's really not a good opinion to have, but I do believe that some members of the anime production team did have something like that in mind.
Yeah, and it's a shame that they did.
Well, they do have to still sell the visual novel itself, after all.
Yep.
So, this is actually a pretty popular opinion on, adaptations in general. That when an anime comes out, it should be the definitive edition of the story. But I actually believe that the anime should not make uh, everything that came before it non-existent. Like it has its strong points, like the medium itself. It has its weak points, so it should not try to make everything else irrelevant. It should focus on what it does well, and leave everything else to the predecessor, so to say.
But not at the cost of coherency. I
Yes,
feel
yes, of course. It's my personal gripe, so to say, after hearing some opinions on Ninja Slayer, for example. If you've seen that anime, it's
I haven't.
certainly well. It's basically it's like I said. It took a very liberal approach. It did some stuff that you could have only done in the anime. Like, it didn't really go that deeply into the story aspects of it. It just tried to be as flashy as possible. And some people didn't like it because they expected something more serious, like the manga version. But I think the world which has the novel, the manga, and the anime is a much better place, which only has the anime, which does everything the rest does, but better.
Yes, agreed.
Anyways, going back to Dies Irae. We move on to episode number 4.
Yes.
Episode number 4, which is called Spider.
Yes.
Boy. So,
Yes.
it has Ren getting another info dump, this time by K, which explains to him the concept of Ewigkeit, which is the driving force behind everyone's superpowers. It has Ren's first actual interaction with Mari in his dreams, where he actually takes her for a real person. Um, Although it's still not quite to the degree it gets later on. And uh, it also has Spine, who first finds Ren in school and then kidnaps Kasumi. Ren goes to rescue her, meets Trifle on the way, gets spooked, then finds Spine in the garden and uses Ewigkeit for the very first time. Alright, so for some context, before the anime aired, Masada said that the anime is going to develop Spine's character to some degree, because in the visual novel you didn't really see what he actually does for the story. Like, he's just a tutorial fight, literally. And Masada wanted to show him as a bit more of a behind-the-scenes guy that he is, that he was uh, getting involved in the entire Shambhala project and so on. But then we get to his fight scene, which was actually one of my favorite scenes in the visual novel. It really sold me on how Masada develops his characters, because let's face it, Spine is not a major character. But still, even in this very short actually scene, we get to see so much of him. We get to love him. We get to really feel for him.
I hear the love in your voice, and I just can't. It's very touching.
Well, because it's an excellent scene, and
Yeah.
partially because of Harasawa's performance, of course.
Yes, of course.
And then the anime cuts most of it, and I just don't know why. It
You
just
know,
doesn't make sense to me.
there's another point in this episode which I found lacking, and it's a scene I really liked. The first part of it wasn't the first part of the episode, but it was a scene I very liked from that chapter, which was Kay teaching Ren about Ewekai.
Yes, yes.
The scene with the gun, to be exact.
Oh, yes, yes.
I really liked that because it was trial by fire.
It was
Literal
actually in
fire.
the manga, so I did expect to see it in the anime, but then it just wasn't there.
It wasn't there, and I found that a bit disappointing because I felt it was a very vivid kind of
Yes,
scene, a very
you
memorable
just
scene.
get it like that.
Yes, it's like, shonen at its finest. It's kind of trading under fire. But yes, the scene with Spine. Now, Spine's scene is a very mixed bag because it did actually expand a bit on Spine.
Yes, it did show him.
It did some things better than the visual novel did, but it did a lot of things worse. Because, for example, it showed that he had basically Kagami's life in his hands, and
Yes, even
and
though we didn't really get that feeling in the visual novel because Ren just kind of blows his cover that, oh, I know it's not Kasumi, so you.
and that's another scene that was lost, and I really don't like it.
Yes.
Don't like it.
That said,
Uh,
I do believe that
the
Shpine is the
difficulty.
sort of character who would still have Kasumi's life in his hands, even if he did have this sort of.
See, but that's speculation. I'm going. Did you really think I'd go without a backup plan? That's good. I like that. That was
Yes.
fun. My main problem was that this scene was horribly directed. For example,
Yeah,
basically ties up Ren, and then says, "Yeah, I want to cooperate with you," and then punches him in the gut, and it's like, I'm sure he'll be very inclined to cooperate with you after you beat him up.
Well, he had the same problem in the visual novel, honestly.
He kind of did and he kind of didn't, because he was extorting Ren, but there's a difference between asking someone for cooperation and beating them up.
Well,
It's like
he basically misunderstood Ran's character, so. Oh, I see. You have Ewigkeit, so you're a murder machine like me. So maybe we can find common ground in that. And he didn't.
yes, but that's not the point. Now, the thing is, the visual novel didn't actually show Ren killing Spina. He just achieves,
Well,
Yitzhak,
anime
and
didn't
Spina
either.
just dies, and he just dies. And in the anime, it does show Ren actually fighting him to some degree, though. And this is a good point of mentioning that Ren's guillotine looks horrible in the anime. It looks very bad.
Yes,
Um,
we actually had some preview of it in the very first trailer, where he
Yeah, and it
had
showed him,
blades.
yes, and it showed him sprouting blades, and that was something that, by the way, is an early example of fans complaining about stuff getting added. That was something I was perfectly fine with.
Yeah, I
It's
think it's fine. It's already estimated in the lore, so it
yes,
just moved a bit earlier on.
yes, it's estimated in the lore. We know that Wilhelm basically complained about that as well. That when he just got his Oekite, controlling it was really hard because he's a fusion type. It's the type that basically is ingrained in his body. So controlling that is actually really hard, and you can basically see
And it's
Ren
not
earlier.
pretty.
Yes, Ren earlier in the episode going for some body horror shit going on there, which
Yes.
is pretty
And in the
vivid.
visual novel, he's absolutely fine.
Yep, he looks perfectly fine, and it's a little weird.
Well, he is the protagonist, so you can explain
Yes,
it
but
like, oh, it's just Mercurius did it, so.
yes, and still, I felt that that was something nice that the anime added.
Yes.
And other stuff like Spina having this backup plan, which was nice.
And also him, like, cutting the buildings in half.
Yes, there was definitely more like action going on
Like,
there.
he really is estimated as a threat.
He is estimated as a threat, and it's something that like the visual novel kind of fumbled on, and a lot of the reason why a lot of the newer fans are kind of oblivious as to why people like Spina so much. The guy's a complete pushover. He dies like this. Why do you like this guy so much? So, yeah, but like you said, it did cut out a lot of very important narration. Did cut out Spina Spine explaining his motivations, explaining his fears. It's basically giving you the first glimpse into what the generals and Reinhardt are
Yes,
like.
well, at least we got it in episode 0, I guess.
Kind of, sort of, but and it also didn't. And it also failed to kind of explain some of his origins, which is
Yes, some of it.
Spine's charm is how mysterious he is, how even he no longer remembers his true name and stuff like that.
I believe he doesn't think he needs it anymore. Like, he's
No,
more than a human nowadays.
that's besides the point, though.
Well, yeah.
At least for us, because a lot of actually almost all of Dies Irae's main cast are based off existing historical figures. So, like, the question of who he was in Nazi Germany is actually an interesting one to chew on.
Yeah,
But
I think there are two most common theories. The first is that he is based on Mengele, because he is like the scheming type and so on. But Mengele was actually quite a pretty man, so I'm not sure it fits here.
no, it actually fits perfectly. What are you talking about?
Well, I suppose, yeah. And the second theory is that he's based on Lucian Staniak, who was a Polish maniac who went by the name of Crimson Spider because he left letters written in his blood, written in very thin letters, and he was actually made up. He didn't actually exist, but he could still be the basis for Spine's character.
Well, that's actually something I didn't know, so I learned something new
Yeah.
today. But yeah, but basically cutting out the dialogue, like you said, was pretty big. I feel like.
Yeah, so needless to say, I wasn't a fan of this episode. And
No.
another point here is Trifa's character and the way uh, he is featured in the scene.
Yes.
So
I remember Masada tweeted after this, and he was like, "Oh my God, Spine made made Trifa get his re-out, guys. Spine is fucking amazing."
what
So
he is,
yes, he is. But yes, it basically showed Trifa basically double crossing him, basically silencing him,
yes,
which is something that the visual novel kind of glossed over, while the which is and it's not inconsequential because later Wilhelm calls him out on it.
yeah, that's right.
He calls him out on it. He basically said, "You silenced Spina. You used him, and then once you were done with him, you buried him. That's kind of
Yeah,
that's technically treason, you know." So yeah, it's kind of something that the anime expanded on, that the visual novel didn't. But again,
it could have been handled better.
yeah, they add a couple of good things and take double of that and remove it.
Basically, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of not a fair trade off.
And the last point I'd like to mention here about Trifa is that when Ren meets him in the alleyway, there is a big shadow of some sort of monster that Trifa leaves while he goes away. And after we have seen his new form in the latest trailers, I went back and checked this episode to see, oh, they actually hinted at it way back here, and no, it doesn't actually match his new form, and it's a wasted opportunity, I think.
Probably yes. So episode.
Yes, episode 5, which is the last one for today, and luckily
Yes.
we don't have that much to discuss here because it's pretty good. It's
Yes.
called The Reunion. It covers Mary's backstory. It has Mary actually materialize in Ren's bed. It has her, Kasumi, and Ren having a good time in the city, and then they have Ellie coming to their doorway, inviting Ren to the Bottomless Pit Club, meeting Shiro again, and having this explanation of what he was doing all this time and what he is going to do from now on, and then we get to another major fight between LDO and the now Ren team, because a passerby Ikemen drops by and shoots
Saves the
Wilhelm
day.
in the face. Yes. Like I said, it was a pretty good episode. I'm not even sure there's anything to talk about here because
Yes, it was in my opinion like one of the best episodes in the anime so far. It was very
yes,
fun. It showed a lot of
it was
it was
quite
actually
faithful to the visual novel too. It didn't drop that much.
yes, it actually added a lot. It added a lot of good. It added a lot of good scenes. It actually had a line that ended up becoming a meme. Ren going, "What is this? This is amazing."
Yes.
It ended up being a meme. It's actually in the Dies Irae wiki if you look it up. So yeah, that's
Oh.
very cute.
Oh.
Yes, it is. If you look it up, it's there. Um, Now, it had a lot of cute scenes, and it's obvious. It wasn't like the first obvious. It was the first episode. It made it obvious how much the anime is trying to act up Mari's cuteness.
Yes.
It
After
had
all,
like
it is her route.
it is her root, and she's in a lot of the promotional material, so they're going to
Yes.
want to
Yes.
sell her well. But it had a lot of good scenes, like her getting at bets from Ren, or her imitating Kasumi, which was a
Yes.
hilarious
Yes.
scene.
That was excellent.
It was a very fun episode. I remember reacting very favorably to it.
Yes. Everyone did.
Uh, yes. Then we had Eri and Shiro, which there's not a lot to say about this. It was decent.
Well, they didn't leave out anything that had to be said, I'd say.
Yes.
Which is a good
Yes.
thing.
Yes, that's a good thing.
And shouldn't be taken for granted, really.
With this anime, no.
Yes.
And yeah, it also had a cool scene with Ren cutting Ellie's gun, which was kind of cool. It
Yes.
showed that
It was actually in the manga, I think.
yeah, but
It was Shiro's gun, but whatever.
but it was nice because it showed that Ren is gaining a certain degree of mastery over his power,
Yes.
which is nice compared to how erratically he was fighting against Spina the episode before.
Some would
Um,
say it's just inconsistency.
I guess, yeah. It would make sense more in the visual novel because you could see that after Kay gave him instructions, it was actually
Yes.
training on doing that. Well, it was also in the anime. You
It's
could-
just that in the next episode he loses control again to some extent, and
yeah. That's a whole different
well,
rabbit hole to go.
in a vacuum, this episode is pretty good because it's basically well directed. That's what it comes down to, I think.
Yes,
It
yes, they
had
got
good comedic time, and it had, despite having some exposition, it didn't feel boring because you had like Mari's flashback was well animated. It wasn't just Mercurius talking.
yes,
The scene in the bottomless pit was pretty nice because you have all these new characters who are explaining stuff about the LDO and some fresh moments here and there. And the action at the end, while short, was pretty nice.
yes.
Mm, so, anything that you wish was here? Oh, I think there is one scene that I wish was added, like when I believe it was around this time where the LDO is sitting around the round table and Trifa is telling them what to do next, and I could have used some cameos from the commanders in the Colosseum, so to say. Well,
By the way, another scene, kind of important scene that we kind of neglected to discuss was after Spina dies and the first swastika opens.
oh yeah. No,
The
it's the second
hmm?
swastika.
The second swastika opens, right? After the second swastika opens, the existing LDO members experience the pain
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
And it's a very important scene because it also kind of shows their relationship to the generals. Like you have Wilhelm like going crazy over Schreiber's seat, and over Schreiber's seat, and Rusalka being frightened of Machina's seat, and you
Yeah,
also have
yeah,
Kay experiencing the pain of the stigmata for the first time,
yes.
which was it was a pretty keen, pretty memorable scene in the visual novel. It
You do have to keep
also
in mind that it was basically a punishment for them because
yes, it was.
yes, Reinhard realized that Spinner betrayed him basically, and that's why he punished the rest of the LDO so they wouldn't do the same.
Yes.
But since they didn't really explain it in the anime that Spinner actually tried to betray everyone, it was basically just reinforce silence in him. This entire scene just didn't feel the same.
Yes. So yeah, that's a bit of a bit of a letdown.
Well,
It would have happened actually between episode 4 and episode 5, so it's not
yeah,
out of
something
place
like
to
that.
talk about it. So it's not out of place to discuss it. But yeah, it's a shame that they cut it out. I
Well,
feel like
still a pretty good episode.
yes,
Before, not really good one, but we'll leave that for the next
yes,
time. We already have not 2 hours, but almost two, so we should just finish here, I suppose.
yes,
Yes. So, in conclusion, do ask us questions. Don't be afraid. We can be found on social media. We have Twitter accounts, which we will post in the video description, or you can just leave a comment on YouTube. And if you have any questions, it can literally be anything like who's the strongest god in Shinza verse, and we will try to explain that power levels are irrelevant
yes,
and
yes,
stuff like that. We will be happy to answer any questions you have. You also
yes,
can speak your mind. Do you like this format? Do you wish we would have shorter episodes? Do you have any ideas for future topics? Because even if we can actually talk for hours about like any character,
yes,
we can still talk about the ones you want to hear about. So do leave a comment, and if you feel like this sort of content is better released weekly or bi-weekly, do tell that as well, because it's not always that we will have some news to talk about. So if we will release something like this every 2 weeks, will you mind? Or would you rather have us talk for 2 hours every week?
yes.
Anyways, what about does it for this week's episode, and hopefully next time we will discuss whatever it is Light is going to release about Pantheon and the rest of the 6 episodes of the anime that are already released. And uh, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Goodbye.